What if I told you the government just signed a document that could legally take your Bitcoin away? What if the same playbook used to steal gold from American citizens in 1933 is happening right now with cryptocurrency? And what if everyone celebrating this move is completely missing what is actually written in black and white? Stay with me, because what you are about to learn could change everything you thought you knew about the future of Bitcoin in America. If you find value in uncovering the real stories behind financial history, hit that subscribe button right now. Here at Monetary Archaeologist, we dig deep into the truth that mainstream media refuses to touch. Trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. Now, let me take you back to January 23, 2025. President Trump put his signature on an executive order. The headlines called it revolutionary. They said it was pro-crypto. They said America was finally embracing digital innovation. Bitcoin prices jumped. Social media exploded with celebration. Everyone called it a massive win for cryptocurrency holders. Everyone except the people who actually sat down and read the entire document. Because here is the thing, when you strip away the fancy language, when you look at the legal structure underneath, when you compare it to what happened almost 100 years ago, you start to see something very different, something that most people are completely blind to. This executive order is not what they are telling you. This is the foundation for something else, something we have seen before. Let me take you back to 1933. President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. The government called gold a strategic national asset. They said it was essential for economic stability. They gave the Treasury the power to acquire and hold gold on behalf of the American people. Sound familiar? It should, because then they made it illegal for ordinary citizens to own gold. For 41 years, Americans could not hold the very asset their government deemed essential. The government bought gold from citizens at a fixed price. Then they changed that price overnight. They made themselves wealthy while erasing 40% of the national debt. They called it saving the economy. It was the biggest wealth grab in American history, and nobody saw it coming until it was far too late. Now fast forward to today. Trump's executive order uses almost the exact same language, the same legal framework, the same building blocks that made 1933 possible. Let me walk you through exactly what this document actually says. Not the headlines, not the tweets, the actual words on the page. The order has a nice-sounding title. It talks about strengthening American leadership in digital financial technology, innovation, competitiveness, all the buzzwords that make people feel good. But titles are just marketing. The real substance is buried in the details. The first section establishes policy. It says the United States government will position itself as a leader in digital asset markets. It declares digital assets vital to American economic security. And here is the critical part. It establishes that the federal government will acquire, hold, and manage digital assets as strategic reserves. Read that one more time and let it sink in. The federal government will acquire digital assets as strategic reserves. This is not about protecting your right to own Bitcoin. This is about the government owning Bitcoin, building a massive reserve, managing it the same way they manage oil reserves, the same way they manage gold sitting in Fort Knox. The second section grants authority. It tells the Treasury Department to develop frameworks for digital asset acquisition. It authorizes Treasury to hold Bitcoin on behalf of the United States. It directs them to create custody solutions and valuation methods for government-held digital assets. This is infrastructure. They are building a machine. You do not build this kind of machine for a small symbolic gesture. You build it when you are planning to acquire enormous amounts of value. And the third section talks about how they will acquire these assets. Through seizure from criminal cases. They already hold over 200,000 Bitcoin from cases like Silk Road. Through accepting Bitcoin as payment for fines and penalties, and through direct market purchases. But here is what the order does not say. It does not set any limits. There is no cap on how much they can acquire. There is no ceiling. Now, let me show you why this language matters so much. Roosevelt's order in 1933 declared gold a strategic asset, essential to national economic stability. Trump's order declares Bitcoin a strategic asset vital to national security. Same framing, different century. Roosevelt's order gave Treasury the authority to acquire and hold gold on behalf of the United States. Trump's order gives Treasury the authority to acquire and hold digital assets on behalf of the United States. Same power, different asset. Roosevelt's order required citizens to hand over their gold to Federal Reserve banks. Trump's order does not require that yet, but it creates the legal foundation. The framework for mandatory acquisition can be added later. Roosevelt's order established penalties for breaking the rules: 10 years in prison, $10,000 in fines. Trump's order does not establish those penalties yet, but the authority exists to add them through future laws or regulations. The pattern is identical. Step 1, declare the asset strategic. Step 2, grant acquisition authority. Step 3, build the infrastructure. Step 4, make it mandatory. Roosevelt completed all 4 steps. Trump just completed steps 1 through 3. Step 4 is coming. Now you might be asking the obvious question. Why would the government want to take Bitcoin from its citizens? The same reason they took gold: to revalue it and erase debt. The United States government owes $37 trillion. The debt, compared to everything the economy produces, is 132%. Just the interest payments alone are over $1 trillion every single year, and that number keeps climbing. By 2027, interest payments could hit $2 trillion annually if rates stay where they are. This debt cannot be repaid through normal methods. You cannot tax your way out, you cannot cut spending enough, you cannot grow the economy fast enough. The math simply does not work. There is only one solution that has worked historically: currency devaluation through asset revaluation. Here is exactly how it worked in 1933. The government forced citizens to sell their gold at $20.67 per ounce. Then they changed the official price to $35. That is a 69% increase overnight. 2 things happened from this move. First, the government's gold reserves jumped from $4 billion to nearly $7 billion instantly. Second, the dollar became worth less compared to gold. This meant all the debt the government owed in dollars suddenly became easier to pay back. They erased roughly 40% of their real debt burden without paying a single extra dollar. They did it legally because they controlled the gold and set the price. Now apply this same logic to Bitcoin. Imagine the government acquires 1 million Bitcoin over the next few years. That is the target mentioned in legislation proposed by Senator Cynthia Lummis. That legislation aligns perfectly with this executive order. At current prices around $100,000, 1 million Bitcoin would cost $100 billion. But they will not pay market price. They will acquire through seizures that cost nothing, through fines that actually generate revenue, through below-market mandatory purchases if they implement confiscation. Let us say their average cost ends up around $60,000 per Bitcoin. That is $60 billion total. Now they hold 1 million Bitcoin. Then comes the revaluation. They announce that for official government balance sheet purposes, Bitcoin is now valued at $1 million per coin. Why 1 million? Because that makes the math work. At that valuation, 1 million Bitcoin equals $1 trillion in hard assets. Combine that with a gold revaluation happening at the same time, and suddenly the government holds 5 to 7 trillion in real asset value. Assets that offset debt, assets that back the dollar. The marketing will sound wonderful: a return to sound money, fiscal responsibility, the dollar backed by Bitcoin and gold, hard assets for a stronger America. The Bitcoin community will celebrate, the gold community will celebrate, everyone will cheer. But here is what actually happens next. When the government revalues Bitcoin to $1 million, the market follows. The largest holder in the world just announced a price. The market reprices to match. Bitcoin climbs from 100,000 to 300,000 to 500,000 to 800,000 over the next year or two. And as Bitcoin rises 10 times, what happens to the dollar? It collapses. If Bitcoin goes from 100,000 to 1 million, that is not Bitcoin going up. That is the dollar going down, 90% down. A 90% collapse in what your dollars can buy shows up everywhere. Food prices multiply by 5. Energy costs explode. Housing becomes unreachable for ordinary people. Everything priced in dollars loses 90% of its real value, including government debt. The $37 trillion is still $37 trillion on paper, but in real terms, adjusted for what dollars can actually buy, it is worth around $4 trillion. They just erased 90% of the debt burden. They just transferred wealth from everyone holding dollars to the government holding Bitcoin. This is the plan. This is what the executive order enables, and almost nobody understands it because they are too busy celebrating that the government seems to like Bitcoin. Let me show you the specific pieces of this executive order that make all of this possible. The order creates a working group on digital asset markets. This group includes the Treasury Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, the Attorney General, and leaders from multiple other agencies. This is not a research committee. This is an action team. Treasury handles buying and storing. Justice handles seizing and enforcing. Commerce handles market coordination. This is the bureaucratic machinery for a massive operation. The order also directs the creation of something called valuation methodologies. This sounds boring and technical. It is actually one of the most important pieces. Right now, Bitcoin is worth whatever buyers and sellers agree to on exchanges, market price. But this order creates government authority to establish official valuation, a government price separate from market price. In 1933, the market price for gold was higher than the official price of $20, but the government paid the official price when they confiscated. Then they raised the official price to $35. The market eventually followed because the government became the dominant holder. The same framework is being built for Bitcoin. Official valuation means official price. The government pays you one number and revalues to another number. They profit, you lose. The order also addresses custody solutions at government scale. This might seem like paperwork. It is actually a massive signal. You do not build Fort Knox for a few gold coins. You build Fort Knox for 8,000 tons. This order directs creation of custody infrastructure at strategic reserve scale, multi-billion-dollar custody, maximum security, government-controlled wallets that hold national Bitcoin the way vaults hold national gold. This infrastructure takes a year to 18 months to build properly. The order was signed in early 2025. The machinery will be ready by mid-2026. That is when Phase 2 begins. Now here is where it gets really interesting. The order explicitly says it protects current holders. This is the part everyone celebrates. It states that lawful holders of digital assets have the right to self-custody and use their assets free from government overreach. Sounds great. But read the specific word choice. Lawful holders. What makes a holder lawful versus unlawful? Right now, everyone is lawful. But what happens when future regulation requires registration, reporting, licensing to hold Bitcoin above a certain amount? Suddenly, if you do not comply with those requirements, you become unlawful. And unlawful holders are not protected by this executive order. This is how mandatory sale gets implemented. You still technically have the right to hold Bitcoin, but the requirements to exercise that right become impossible to meet. Registration, reporting every transaction, taxation on gains you have not even realized, eventually mandatory licensing to hold more than 10 Bitcoin, then more than 1 Bitcoin. Fail to comply and you are unlawful. Unlawful means seizure. You still have rights on paper, you just cannot access them in practice. Now let me show you the timeline so you understand when all of this happens. Right now we are in the first phase, legal framework and narrative building. The executive order establishes authority. The working group develops plans. Treasury builds custody systems. Justice identifies opportunities to seize more Bitcoin. The story is positive. Innovation, leadership, number go up. This is when most people get fooled. They see good headlines and assume good intentions. They never read the actual order. They never see the machinery being built around them. The second phase hits around 2026. Quiet accumulation and regulatory pressure. The government starts acquiring Bitcoin at scale without announcing how much. More seizures from criminal cases. More payments accepted as fines. Purchases through middlemen to avoid spiking the market. At the same time, regulations get tighter. Exchanges face new requirements. Tax rules become more aggressive. Self-custody becomes legally complicated. The message is subtle but clear. Selling your Bitcoin is easier than keeping it. People without strong conviction will sell. They will take profits. They will avoid the hassle. The government acquires their coins at market prices. Regular people get squeezed out before Phase 3. The third phase likely arrives around 2027, crisis and mandatory action. Some triggering event creates justification for emergency measures. A debt ceiling disaster, a major bank collapse, a dollar crisis as foreign countries dump American bonds. Whatever the trigger, the response is the same. Emergency authority to stabilize the financial system. Part of that stabilization becomes mandatory sale of Bitcoin above a certain threshold to the Treasury at the official price. The official price will be below market, maybe 80,000 when the market is at 150,000. You get forced to sell at almost half what it is worth. Penalties for refusing are severe: criminal prosecution, asset seizure, prison. Most people comply because the government already knows what they own. Exchanges reported them. Tax filings revealed them. They get a letter, 30 days to comply. Comply or face prosecution. After mandatory sale, after the government holds 1 million Bitcoin or more, comes Phase 4, revaluation. The official price jumps from 80,000 to 1 million. The government's position goes from 80 billion to 1 trillion. Gold gets revalued at the same time. Total hard asset backing reaches 5 to 7 trillion. The dollar gets declared backed by Bitcoin and gold. Markets reprice. Inflation explodes. The dollar collapses. Debt gets erased. Wealth transfers from citizens who sold at the official price to the government that revalued to a much higher price. Exactly like 1933. Let me be clear about who wins and who loses in this scenario. The government wins. They erase trillions in real debt burden. Politicians avoid the impossible choice between cutting programs and raising taxes. They just devalue instead. Early holders who do not comply with confiscation win. If you hold Bitcoin through self-custody that the government does not know about, if you do not sell at the official price, you ride the revaluation from 100,000 to 1 million. 10 times your money while everyone else loses. Wealthy insiders who position in hard assets win. Real estate, gold, Bitcoin, commodities. They preserve wealth through the devaluation. People in countries that do not confiscate win. If you live in Singapore or Switzerland holding Bitcoin in local custody, American orders do not apply. You keep everything. Now for the losers. Anyone who complied with confiscation loses everything. You sold at 80,000 and watched it go to 1 million. You lost 92% of potential value. Plus, your dollars are now worth 90% less from inflation. Anyone holding cash or bonds loses. Dollar devaluation destroys purchasing power. Your 100,000 in savings buys what 10,000 bought before. Retirees on fixed income lose. Social Security gets adjusted for inflation, but always behind real price increases. Middle-class workers lose. Wages never keep pace with inflation. Your paycheck doubles, but prices go up 5 times.
This is wealth transfer from ordinary people to the government, from savers to those who control the system. The same transfer that happened in 1933, just larger because the debt is larger. Now let me tell you what you can do to protect yourself. First, self-custody. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges immediately. If it sits on Coinbase or any centralized platform,
It is in a government database. They know you have it. They can freeze it. They can force the exchange to sell on your behalf. If you hold in a hardware wallet you control, they can only send a letter. They cannot automatically seize. Move to self-custody now. Second, minimize future exposure. Every Bitcoin you buy through an exchange gets reported. Consider alternatives. Peer-to-peer platforms, Bitcoin ATMs with low limits. These methods reduce database entries. Third, diversify across jurisdictions. Assets held outside American reach are harder to confiscate. Research legal structures in favorable locations. This requires professional guidance, but wealthy families have used these strategies for centuries. Fourth, spread across multiple hard assets. Do not put everything in one place. Gold stored privately. Real estate that produces income, businesses that generate cash flow regardless of currency. If one gets targeted, others survive. Fifth, understand enforcement reality. In 1933, most people complied with gold confiscation out of fear, but actual prosecutions were rare. The government relies on voluntary compliance because they cannot prosecute everyone. The threatened risk is higher than the actual risk. I am not telling you to break laws. I am telling you to understand how enforcement actually works. Now let me address the objections. Some people say Trump is pro-Bitcoin. He spoke at conferences. He would never confiscate. Roosevelt was pro-sound money too. He campaigned on fiscal responsibility. Then he confiscated gold because the crisis left no other option. Politicians say what gets them elected. They do what survival requires. Some people say Bitcoin is decentralized. They cannot confiscate it like gold. The network is decentralized. Ownership in America is not. Exchanges have your information. The IRS has your information. They know what you own. Decentralization protects the network from shutdown. It does not protect you from a confiscation letter with your name on it. Some people say there would be massive political backlash. There was backlash against gold confiscation. It happened anyway. There was backlash against money printing. It happened anyway. When governments face survival, they act first and manage consequences later. Some people say this is just conspiracy theory. The evidence is the executive order itself, the language creating strategic reserve authority, the framework for official valuation, the machinery for government-scale custody, the exact parallel to 1933. This is not conspiracy. This is pattern recognition. Let me be absolutely clear about what I am saying. I am not saying confiscation happens tomorrow. I am not saying this is guaranteed. I am saying the legal framework is being built. The infrastructure is being created. The historical parallel is exact. The fiscal math makes it likely. Could the government find another solution? Could they actually cut spending or grow out of the debt? Theoretically, yes. Realistically, no. Those solutions require political courage. Confiscation requires only a crisis and an executive order. Which do you think they will choose? I am also not saying sell all your Bitcoin. I am saying hold it in ways that protect you. Self-custody, international diversification, multiple asset classes. If confiscation never happens, you still have your Bitcoin. If it does happen, you are positioned to survive. Here is the bottom line. Trump's Bitcoin executive order is not what the media says it is. It is not pro-crypto innovation. It is not American leadership in digital assets. It is the legal framework for strategic acquisition, official valuation, potential confiscation, the same framework Roosevelt used in 1933. The language is almost identical. The fiscal situation is worse. The mechanism will be the same. Confiscate at official price, revalue higher, debase the dollar, erase debt, transfer wealth from citizens to government. The only question is whether you position correctly when it happens. The executive order is signed. The working group is active. The infrastructure is being built. The timeline stretches from 2025 to 2027. You have 18 to 36 months. That is not much time. To restructure how you hold assets, to move to self-custody, to diversify internationally, to prepare mentally for what is coming. Start now. Read the executive order yourself. Verify everything I have told you. Then take action based on what you see, not what influencers tell you to see. Because when confiscation letters go out, when the official price gets announced, when compliance becomes mandatory, it will be too late. Your assets will be frozen. Your options will be gone. The people who win are the people who saw it coming and positioned early. The people who lose are the people who celebrated the executive order without ever reading it. This is not financial advice. This is pattern recognition. The pattern from 1933 is repeating in 2025. The language is the same. The authority is the same. The outcome will be the same. Position yourself now while you still can.
The executive order is signed. The clock is running. The choice is yours.